Okay, Joe, we're talking about environment now. So where do you stand in your campaign on this environmental crisis we're in?
Well, I'm pretty much in line with what the ASP believes as far as this goes. And I see it as a pro-life issue and as a huge pro-life issue. And what was just being said, I agree with. I think it's a climate crisis. I was in a graduate class at Notre Dame University. We were talking about some stuff, and what occurred to me was at the time they were talking about Saddam Hussein and him gassing the Kurds, and how we got up in arms and with that, and that was the precursor for the Gulf War. Well, when you look at this realistically, us in the first world, because of our carbon emissions, what are we doing, Jeffrey? We're gassing the world. And so you would not have to be a rocket science theologian to figure out that we're culpable for the deaths of people right now in more arid countries where there's drought and famine as a direct result of this. So we're already killing people now from this. So what we did was we went out into America, and over a period of 20 years, we have researched an extensive amount of models, to go back to my phraseology models, in order to ramp up alternative energy, number one, whether it is solar or it's wind. We researched a wave action farm out in the ocean off of Maine. That we have the technology right now in order to ramp that up more. And here's the tough part. I would also ask the American public in a real major way to start to sacrifice. Just like we sacrificed during World War II for the war effort. Well, Jeffrey, right now, it's a war on the environment. And so people need to, either through mandatory rationing, cutting back, however you want it, because I don't know if people left to their own volition, like we're all up in arms and we have to do all this stuff. Nobody talks about cutting back. We need to become a society of conservers, not a society of consumers at this point, a society of conservers. And so not a very palatable message to the general electorate at this point. But again, they need somebody not blowing sunshine up their butts, so to speak, but somebody telling them the truth. And ask them, because these guys, they're all talking from that stage about ramping up alternative energy, but there's not going to be one of them tonight who's going to say the American people need to start to sacrifice. So that's the kind of leadership I would. Go ahead.
No. Okay, we have a crucial part with just like you mentioned in World War II, where we all pitch in and we bring in the sacrifice. At the same time, I would assume that we wouldn't have gotten in the situation we're in if it wasn't profitable for some to take advantage of this. So looking then on economics and on the business end, what do you see as far as for incentives, or whether it would be how do you approach businesses that are that are hurting our environment just for their bottom line and just so they can get a little higher dividend in this quarter?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at the businesses, one of the things that you would impose is what was just brought up is a carbon tax for these businesses. And so that would force them into cutting back to a degree. What we have to look at some point, Jeffrey, and again, the businesses don't exist in a vacuum. There's people that create a demand for the stuff that they're making. This is fascinating here. We went to Bowling Green State University. They have an alternative vehicles department. And I met with a professor there. And what he said to me was, he goes, Joe, it takes as much fossil fuel to create a car as the car will burn in its lifetime. And so at some point, we need to shift the paradigm economically, this Green New Deal they're talking about, so to speak. We need to shift the paradigm, again, to go back to being a society of conservers, not consumers. If we're going to lead the world, perhaps, Jeffrey, we need to start leading it in the right way. And so that's the business thing. It's the corollary is that city thing. You know, it's like if you look at the lead, in a vacuum as opposed to looking at the whole structural dynamic there, you're never going to change that. And it's the same with this. You can't just look at the businesses, you have to look at what's driving the demand for the businesses to make those products. And so if we can't impact it at a consumer level, this is never going to change.
All right. Christy, do you have stuff you'd like to share or thoughts on the environment? I figured since you share the environment, you might.
Yeah, I love the environment. Hope you don't mind, I'm eating a snack. But I think there is definitely some truth to what Joe is saying, that we do need to be a culture of conservation, not consumerism. But I think also that it's kind of like something that really irks me, for example, is the plastic straw ban. Yes, obviously, if you can do without a plastic straw, don't get a plastic straw. On the other hand, we're, shaming people for using a plastic straw when corporations are polluting exponentially more than your average consumer. And those corporations kind of get a break and are doing good things for the economy, I guess. But the person using the plastic straw is suddenly this heathen, which is kind of a mental disconnect. So I think, of course, you have to be sustainable in your own life, and that's great. But we need to hold corporations accountable for their tremendous impact on the environment.